So check this out, new bipedal robots can actually stay upright when you try to break their legs with a stick. Push them over, shove them, grab for them, and they wince away. Especially this moment where it like tries to get away from being touched. That freaking seems way too real to me. But that's the future us humans are building for ourselves. We're so smart, aren't we? So if you're into really tiny things, you know, like eating a little bit.
It's tiny and fits right in. Fits right in. Little bit.
There's now a super tiny little itty bitty size of a salt grain little cube that acts like a neuron. And you can actually put all these things together and they have spikes just like the human brain, and it computes just like our itty bitty neurons. So in response to the US keeping the top 10% of high-end chips from China, China just made some really old 14 nanometer chips 90% cheaper and just put them at scale. I guess we didn't think that one through all the way, you know? New York City is now deploying weapon detection technology in the crime-ridden subway. And to be clear, this is not just camera vision technology, this is actually ultra-low frequency electromagnetic field detection. Yeah, that's gonna see right through your clothes, bruh. And then we're gonna check out this video. It's slightly older, but it never really hit me just how freaking fast these little tiny mini drones can get. 0 to 200 kilometers, 1 second. Check that out. Actually, listen to how that sounds. That's even more freaky than seeing how fast it is. Get out of here. You're telling me there's some advanced AI in the future that has a couple thousand of those things at its disposal, isn't going to do whatever it wants. And if you're having any doubts, these drones are easily keeping up with the fastest Formula F1 cars. So like, open check case. Just out of curiosity, let's see what kind of G-force that is. What G-force would a human experience if they went from 0 to 200 kilometers in 1 second? Side note, I'm so impressed with how ChatGPT actually like does the math and like writes the formulas out and stuff. Like that is crazy. 5.6 G-forces? How many G-forces does it take before somebody passes out? You know, I'm actually wrong about that. With some training and the equipment, like a suit that will actually squeeze your legs and abdomen to hold the blood into the head, and techniques like tensing muscles and the hook breathing technique, humans can actually withstand up to 9 Gs. But realistically, us regular folks, 4 to 6, we'd be passed out. Now double tangent, let's see if Claude can get the same G-force calculation. So GPT said 5.66 G-forces, and guess what? 5.67 G-forces. Dang, Claude, that's not even the high-end model. That's just the free model. Doing pretty good, gotta admit. But first, before we get into the news, let's find out how close to AGI we are. According to Alan's conservative countdown, we are 72% of the way there still. Good. Got a little more breathing time. All right, let's check out Limic's new bipedal robot. This little guy getting kicked, getting hit, running into sticks. Oh, God, they make you feel for this thing, don't they? Look, man, that's Mother Nature. You see those deer, like baby deer come out and they have to like, you know, they kind of walk like that for a little while, but they don't have anyone kicking them in the face. They don't have anyone hitting them with sticks in the shins, for God's sake. I am used to seeing the 4-legged form factor now, but I am still honestly shocked at just how well the 2-legged bipedal balancing system is. You know, falling over, for us, we have our hands to kind of like the upper body sort of move around to balance ourselves. I doubt I could walk like this without an upper body to offset me. It's very difficult. And just its ability to fall over like that and kind of reorient itself. But now let's see what the Limix bipedal can learn from a human, you know, like learn from its mentor and get some guidance on how to walk. I mean, we are experts at being bipedal. What could you teach this nice little robot? Oh, yeah, kick it in the shin. That's, yeah, that's one way. Oh, again, yeah, I guess you really got to train it there, huh, you jerk? Oh, yeah, kick it from the side. Make sure it stays up. Grab it, pull it back. Pulling and pushing, so impressive. Oh, you need a stick now, huh? Just whack it in the yeah, what a teacher. That's how you teach these things. Good empathy and examples to learn from. Piece of shit. Oh, why don't you go grab it, pull it? Oh, yeah, it's going to duck, run away from you, huh? Yeah, it's going to duck down when you try to grab it. No surprise there. Oh, yeah, spin it around. Oh, let's go see what this warning is in the bottom corner. Stay, but don't do this. Robots are going to remember and come hunt you down later. Let's see. Both the robot and the human completed the tests under professional guidance. Please do not attempt to imitate. Yeah, I'm sure there's a bunch of professionals right off camera here just waiting to help out that poor little robot. What are they, engineers? Or what, maybe help maybe the guy? Or the human medics are there to help the guy in case he gets hurt, in case this little robot just kicking him back. Morality and human decency aside, this thing is freaking impressive. I am getting a similar wow factor to some of the early big dog stuff. And I feel like Limericks, I never heard of this company. They're coming right at Boston Dynamics. See, my friend said it reminded him of Metal Gear Solid 4. Don't know what this is all about, but let's... Oh, yeah. Except that one's a lot bigger. That'd be scary. Dude, those bipedal things at that size... Whoa. Imagine it jumping like that. I'm sure it's a cool game, but I don't buy it for a second. Future versions of Limericks will just take that guy out. So instead of a bunch of GPUs doing all of that tensor mathematics, you can try, and they are successfully doing some computations on neural networks that work exactly like the human brain. They're in 3 dimensions, they process neuronal spikes, and neurons in our brain are incredibly, incredibly tiny. That's how we pack all this in here. I think it's 80 billion, I want to say. Let me check. How many neurons are in the human brain? Ooh, 86 billion. I was close. But the amount of connections they can make, especially because they're in 3 dimensions, is like think in the trillions, leading to an estimated total of about 100 trillion. So that is quite the amount of connections. So if you can get 80 billion of these things lined up in just such a way that they can make 100 trillion connections, you're talking about a human brain kind of computational system. Okay, so a couple of interesting things about this. So if you do put these all together, and they only trigger in the same way our brains would when they get enough of an electrical signal to go past a threshold and then send out a spike. You also end up, in theory, getting the same kind of efficiency that our brains use, which is all of these connections running at a very low amount of electricity and energy needed to run them. Maybe you'll have much faster learning from less data sets. Maybe you can put these in 3-dimensional things that move around like robots, and they can learn in a similar way to us. That's why they call this neuromorphic computing, because it more closely simulates the way the human brain works. Neuro meaning neuron, and then morphic meaning shape, so neuron shape or brain shape. In theory, there's also a very, like, they call it fault tolerance, but there's a way that the human brain is pretty good at having like a piece removed and still generally functioning at a high level. I mean, we all know about, like, it's certainly some of your brain goes away, you're in a lot of trouble a lot of times. But early on, especially, it's very flexible. Like, you notice that babies that are born with certain deficits, it's much different than when a fully, like, kind of formed adult brain is affected. So maybe this is like one of the building blocks that could lead to these energy efficient and very versatile sort of zero-shot learning brains, these neuromorphic systems. All right, now let's talk about some not so cutting edge but super interesting use cases for Chinese chip makers that are launching not 5, not 6, not 7 nanometer computational AI chips, but 14 nanometer. That's really big. Why would they do that? Well, because you can make them 90% cheaper. So yeah, this Chinese manufacturer called IntelliFusion is introducing, quote, deep eyes. Look, these are AI chips that do 48 teraflops for only $140 US. Right? Don't get confused. This is plenty to do lots of things. First off, you can just buy them really cheap and scale them into bigger and bigger Costco-sized warehouses if you want to do cloud stuff. But look, Microsoft is saying right here that as long as a modern AI PC has 40 tera operations per second, then you can consider it advanced. And by the way, just to elaborate on that, I don't know about pushing the modern edge chip being the end game. I know it's like the way it seems right now, and all of these companies are like, yeah, the more you can pack on, the faster we can build these mega systems and cloud servers. But as AI becomes more aware of how to optimize its own code, it's going to find ways to run on all sorts of old hardware. Even just imagine like all these old like iPads and crappy cell phones and PCs from like the early 2000s. I feel like you could just plug them all in, and some kind of AI in the future will just write the right kind of code to optimize across what it needs to, or it will sort of leverage synthetic data in such a way that it can do whatever computations it needs to in a kind of low effort way. The little microchip that's in the camera right there that I'm looking at, the microchip that runs this broken transformer right now, like the chips that are soon going to be in every like elevator and microwave and refrigerator and smart thermostat, can all be networked together, and some kind of AI can just cobble all that together. As long as it's computation that it needs and it can access it in some way, we shouldn't think about it as limited. Yeah, and I really think if you're playing the long game, you could start building giant server clusters on, yeah, 14 nanometer, whatever makes sense, that's like ultra cheap, it's kind of been proven, it's something that could be built out. Like, it's not a bad idea. Right, so let's talk about the excessive crime that's happening in New York subways, according to all these news articles. I mean, I haven't been there, but I assume we're dealing with a big problem. When I go to the airport and I do the whole like thing and it scans me around, I actually don't freak out at all because I know that that's millimeter wave radio frequency technology. And even though I'm not going to say that that technology isn't harmful in any ways, I will tell you, you're getting way more of it sitting wherever you are in a modern like office, house, or whatever than you should be. And when you're sleeping, it's in the walls and it's coming from our cell phones. And it's not worse than that, at least. Like walking around the airport, whether you're in that thing or just walking around with like crazy Wi-Fi everywhere from everyone's cell phone, it's probably both about equally damaging. And they have the advantage of peering through clothing and seeing a weapon, you know, like that kind of weapon, in a way that a metal detector isn't always the best at. It's really kind of the shape and the form factor, not the fact that it's made of metal, that we should be looking for in the first place. And yeah, do they know the shape of my body, including my private parts? Yes, they do. But do they show those to the people who are using the equipment? No, they don't. They use an avatar. And they just show where the weapon is on the avatar. But yes, like they probably technically could like reconstruct the exact shape of my junk. So look, I'm not saying that I'm totally on one side or the other. I'm just going to paint out like the problem that you have to balance here. Like, you need people to want to ride the subway. It's an important part of the infrastructure. People don't feel safe down there. There's too many crimes happening. And when people pull out these weapons, like, you go crazy. You're stuck on a subway and it's very scary and dangerous. And that alone is a problem. Okay, so like doing nothing, that's a choice you can make, but it's a choice that comes with consequences. Or you can implement new technology like this that's using the equivalent of camera vision, but it's looking at that millimeter wave technology to find weapons, detect them, identify them, and point them out to security. Now, it's not completely illegal to have a concealed weapon, so you can walk around and keep it concealed, but the cameras are going to know who you are and the fact that you have one of those weapons on you. So I guess I'd probably say if it's used correctly, this kind of technology should make people feel safer. It should make the police and now even the National Security Guard that has actually been called out to help police and maintain and keep order in these subways, the advantage of knowing who the people are that actually could cause these problems. But the downside is, who's policing the police? Now let's assume the other thing. Let's assume that it's a bit dystopian and there is implemented the system on every subway and every entrance, and there's a bunch of people in some room with screens everywhere that know exactly who everyone is and what weapons they have on them, and knives and probably purses and cell phones and all the other stuff that they could in theory be identifying also. You know, those patterns don't give you a lot of freedom, and there's a bunch of people that you're not thinking about knowing stuff about you when you're riding around in your subway, and maybe they know where you're going and where those weapons come and go each day to see if it's a pattern. You know, I don't love that either, but it's a tough situation. And if sentiment is overwhelming that people are not using the subway and that like crime is out of control and that these weapons need to be identified, I can understand taking measures, but hopefully we can now also put transparency measures in place too. I mean, like, it's a tough question, but I understand why New York might be introducing this kind of stuff. I don't think we're going to have a future where this kind of stuff isn't everywhere. If nothing else, it's going to be implemented in some other countries, and there's going to be more and more incentive to implement this kind of thing in public spaces in the United States, and it's probably coming down the pipeline. It's hard for me to imagine us keeping our privacy. Not saying that's what I want. I'm just saying that's the direction I see things going. I mean, probably what's going to happen, probably where this all ends up is that there's like some camera on every subway or in every public space, and it just knows what everybody's doing in the future. And the second something gets out of hand, like somebody actually pulls out a weapon and points it at someone, it's going to just like shock them or laser them in the eye or diffuse them in some way. And it will probably happen when it has that confidence that like above 99.9% someone's gonna get hurt, and it will probably diffuse both people until like security can sort it out. But that'll have false positives too, and some grandmas are gonna be like, I'm just trying to help my friend out, and she's gonna do something, it's gonna trigger it and zap her in the eye, and that's gonna be crazy news too. But we have to think about how often that happens compared to how much it saves people when that problem inevitably happens in our future. This paper, Dr. Allen said in his newsletter that if he ranked papers, this would be like one of the top ranking ones, which he doesn't rank it, but that means a lot to me. So I have to investigate this. It's called Virtual Copilot Multimodal Large Language Model enables quick access procedures for a single pilot operation. So this is about AI flying airplanes. Idea here is to create a virtual copilot, and not in that way that copilot's usually used by Microsoft to mean like copilot and everything. It literally means some person who's flying an airplane by themselves. That person doesn't have a co-pilot to rely on to be just an extra set of eyes and knowledge to run the airplane correctly. So this artificial intelligent model is trained to both understand how the plane works, the context that the plane is in, and what verbal things are being said by the actual pilot. And I mean, it did pretty well, at least for a second set of eyes. It got the outcome right 90% of the time, and it pulled the right procedures from the manual 86% of the time. So yeah, VCOP, Virtual Copilot, could be a big deal for helping pilots fly safely and deal with emergencies, reducing human errors and making the skies safer for all of us. And honestly, maybe this is going to work its way up into that crazy drone that we saw that went from like 0 to 200 kilometers in 1 second. There is no human that's going to drive that. You need 2 of these virtual co-pilots talking to each other. Actually, put a team of agents in there. Put 50 pilots in there. An agentic workflow. Remember, we saw Andrew Ng talking about that like 2 or 3 videos ago. All right, next paper we're going to talk about is Larimar, the large language model with episodic memory control. Okay, and I wanted to bring up this paper because right now I am reading this book. It's called Why We Remember. And I am fascinated by this author and how they talked about how our brain has these 2 ways to memorize things. There's like a semantic memory where you're just like, it's like rote memory. You're just like 6 times 6 is 36. It just boom, pops into your head without any context. And we have this episodic memory, which is just linking together all of these things. But they don't link together the same for all of us because we chunk things into groups and meaning, and there's variation in how we kind of have grown up in the way we see the world. We're optimistic, pessimistic, what matters to us, and all these things. So we chunk things different, but there's a pattern and an emotional state that will kind of trigger the chunk, and then they all sort of link together. And if you want to remember something over here, you kind of got to start at the beginning of the link and like move your way through. And it's just fascinating. So when this paper is talking about large language models with episodic memory control, I just had to research it because I was wondering, is it like what Claude, Gemini, and GPT are doing? Like, is that semantic memory? Is that just like popping into existence and with how quick it comes up with its answer? And maybe that's why when you ask these systems to think step by step, that's why they do better at especially thinking through kind of logical problems. Okay, and that's what's fascinating about this, because at the crux of their proposal, that's what Larimar is. It's the idea that we can actually take a large language model, a bunch of tokens in latent space, you do mathematics to do next word prediction, and inspire them with a distributed episodic memory knowledge update. It's like, here's your new piece of knowledge, but it's more like an example because everything links together. So if you ask it to do something, it's sort of got a trace history of how it got there, which I guess it's not exactly an example, but it's a framework, a narrowing of the thought into a context window. I mean, that's my descriptor for it, but that's how I would describe this kind of an architecture that not only boosts the speed of incorporating news facts and showing a, quote, 4 to 10 times increase compared to the existing methods, but even more importantly, it actually allows for some selective forgetting, right? Forgetting is a huge part of being intelligent and smart and growing and changing. Forgetting is great. So don't question yourself the next time you leave your keys somewhere and think, oh, am I getting old? Like, you are getting old, but you're also realizing what matters, and probably your brain thought about something that mattered more at the time you put your keys down. Sorry, that's a side note, but this is cool. Maybe we can give some episodic memory to these systems to make maybe vector databases. Augmenting these LLMs with stuff, especially it's kind of closer to its core, like we've seen with some of those vector databases for like facts and knowledge, maybe some episodic memory. Now we're starting to get into the AGI conversation, you know? Maybe if Dr. Allen saw this paper, he might boost that thing up to 73%. I don't know. Let's talk about memorization in terms of large language models, but not as individual tokens, but as full-on paragraphs. So this is some paper that's coming out with some Google researchers on it called Localizing Paragraph Memorization in Language Models. And as always, these papers are more exciting than they sound. So here's the problem that you have to understand before you understand why this paper matters. Sometimes when you pull information from a large language model, Claude, GPT, Gemini, you actually get these full paragraphs that have already been written out there on the internet somewhere else. That's kind of copyright. That's not what these models are supposed to be doing. They're supposed to be simplifying, synthesizing, compressing the internet down to its meaning and to its essence, and then formulating new answers. And that's the experience that we get with working with a large language model, especially the cutting edge frontier models. However, they sometimes do some like spitting out of stuff that's kind of like, ooh, you should probably think a little harder about that. You're just regurgitating, bro. So the researchers are trying to find, when it does that, where in this latent space, this big brain, it actually is, and can you kind of unlearn that so it's a little more original. And they were able to find that there are some places in here where you can actually unlearn it. So the overly memorized paragraphs were found in multiple layers and multiple components. But there is a particular attention head. So remember, attention is all you need. That's what helps you understand the context of what's important when stuff gets fed into these systems. There is a particular head that can be identified that is in the lower layers that was identified as significantly more involved in memorization than the other. So we're going to start there. And the reason that matters is because that attention head focused more on rare tokens. So that would be one of those attention heads that really was like, wow, this is one of those rare times I see this exact word, let's call it a word, but it'd be a token, a word phrase, that you just don't see that combination come up very often. So to help it unlearn these memorized paragraphs early on, you can actually take some of these tokens and alter them early on when you first see it starting to memorize too much of the paragraph, and it changes the model's output. Another interesting fact that came out of this is that these highly memorized paragraphs are actually more likely to be corrupted than the stuff that's synthesized from actual knowledge. So you don't even want it there in the first place. It's not even good knowledge that it's memorizing. So this paper might have a real impact in the next generation of LLMs. So it's going to go in there and it's going to give us more originality, more meaning, and more human-like experience. So, and those of you that have been with me for this saga where I trying to like reach for like 1,000 views per video after doing this for like over a year and uploading thousands of videos, so I don't know why I'm stuck in this rut. I have had a new suggestion that I need to change the lighting, you know, but what if? Like, what if adding a blue light back there makes a huge difference? So let me know if you notice the new lighting. If you like it, I could maybe get some more colored lights, like a blue and a red for down here or something. Does it create some depth? I don't know. Maybe that's going to help it get more views. Look, at this point, I'm down to try anything. Leave me a suggestion on how I can get more views on these videos. And if you want to help me by doing some likes, maybe putting this in a Discord or something, that, you know, a Facebook group somewhere where you actually have influence, I would like super appreciate that. Yeah, smash subscribe, all that stuff. I'll see you guys in the next video. Thanks for watching.